Hey guys, tonight we're wandering down the brightly lit, impossibly long aisles of history to answer a question you've probably never asked yourself, while clutching a basket you only walked in to fill with one thing. How did shopping, a thing humans used to dread, become America's favourite hobby? Once upon a time, buying a sack of flour was a day-long ordeal involving mud, haggling, and a shopkeeper who wrote your debts in a book you couldn't read. Today you can buy a kayak, a karaoke machine, and a 40-pound bag of gummy bears from your bed at 2 a.m. while wearing the same pyjamas you've had on since Tuesday. Somewhere between those 2 points, something went gloriously, expensively wrong. Before we begin, a genuine thank you to the listener who suggested tonight's topic. I love that you sent this one in, because the best ideas on this channel almost always come from you, and every suggestion quietly shapes what we make next. If you enjoy these journeys, feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here, and drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is, because somehow it is always far too late wherever you are. We're also now on Spotify, so if you'd rather drift off with just the sound of my voice and no screen glowing in your face, the link is in the description. Now dim the lights, switch on a fan for that soft background hum, get comfortable, and let your shopping cart of worries roll quietly away. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered why a store smells like that? Why malls have no clocks and no windows, like a casino that sells jeans? Why you can leave the house for milk and come back $400 lighter with a scented candle, a throw pillow, and a deep sense of confusion? Did people always have shopping carts? Or did someone have to invent the thing that squeaks and pulls to the left? When did buying stuff stop being a chore and start being a cure? And could you survive a single afternoon of shopping in a world with no price tags, no returns, and a clerk who expected you to argue with him over the cost of a thimble? Well, you're about to find out. Congratulations. You've just woken up in early America, the general store is open, the floor is sticky for reasons no one will explain, and you, my friend, have a very long list and absolutely no fun ahead of you. Let's start where shopping began for most Americans, which is to say a dim wooden building that smelled like pickles, kerosene, and somebody's regret. Welcome to the general store. There are no aisles, no signs, and no helpful person in a vest asking if you're finding everything okay. There is just one counter, one shopkeeper, and roughly 400 things stacked behind him that you cannot reach, touch, or inspect. You want flour, nails, a bonnet, and some molasses, and you will be getting all of it through him, one slow item at a time, while he tells you a story about his knee. This is not a trip you take for fun. This is a chore you put off until the pantry becomes a tragedy. Let's talk about the smell first, because it greets you before the shopkeeper does. The air is a thick stew of leather, smoked fish, vinegar, ground coffee, lamp oil, and the faint barnyard note of whoever came in before you. Nothing is wrapped, nothing is sealed. The crackers live in an open barrel, exposed to every fly, finger, and sneeze in the county, which is why the phrase about the bottom of the barrel was less a saying and more a warning. You scoop your goods from bins and sacks, and you trust, against all evidence, that the scoop was clean. Now consider the actual buying, which moves at the pace of cold honey. You cannot grab what you want because everything worth having sits on shelves behind the counter, guarded by the one man who knows where it all is. You ask. He fetches. You ask again. He fetches again, slowly, pausing to weigh your sugar on a scale you're fairly sure he calibrated by mood. A simple list of 6 items can eat an entire morning, and heaven help you if someone ahead of you wants to discuss the weather, the crops, and their cousin's lawsuit while you stand there holding your basket like a coat rack. There is no choice either, in the way you've come to expect choice. The store stocks one kind of soap, one kind of nail, one brand of mystery tonic, and if you do not like it, your only other option is the long sad ride home with an empty wagon. Comparing prices is impossible, because there is nowhere else to compare to. The general store is not competing with anyone. It is the only show for a day's travel in any direction, and it knows it, the way the only gas station for 60 miles knows it. The lighting deserved dimension, by which I mean there is barely any. The place is lit by whatever sun struggles through the dusty front window, and a lamp or two that the owner would rather not waste oil on. You are squinting at goods you cannot properly see, handing over eggs or coins to a man you cannot fully make out, in a building that doubles as the post office, the gossip hub, and occasionally the courthouse. It is the beating heart of the town, which tells you a great deal about how exciting the town was. So no, this was not retail therapy. This was retail endurance. You came because you had to. You waited because there was no alternative, and you left tired, mildly cheated, and carrying a sack of flour with the thumbprint already in it. Shopping, at this point in the story, is something done to you, not something you enjoy. And the strangest part is what happened next, because believe it or not, this dim and dreary chore is the soil from which a national hobby would eventually grow. But first, let's talk about how you actually paid for any of it. Now let's talk about paying, because in early America that word did not always involve money. You might be a farmer with eggs, butter, or a sack of corn, and the shopkeeper might be willing to swap goods for goods, like the two of you are running a very serious lemonade stand. And if you have nothing to trade today, no problem. He will simply write your name in a large book and add what you owe to a number that only ever grows. This book is the original credit card, except the interest is social. The statements are verbal, and everyone in town somehow knows your balance before you do. Let's start with the barter, because it was wonderfully chaotic. Hard coins were genuinely scarce out in the country, so people paid with whatever they had a surplus of. You might hand over a dozen eggs, a crock of butter, a bundle of furs, or a few hours of labour in exchange for the things you could not make yourself. The shopkeeper became a sort of accidental warehouse of random goods, taking in whatever the county produced and trying to turn around and sell it before the butter went off. It is a bit like paying for your groceries with the contents of your garage, and the cashier just nodding and accepting your old lawnmower. This meant every transaction involved a quiet, mutual guessing game about value. How many eggs equal a yard of cloth? How much corn buys a pound of nails? There was no app to check, no posted exchange rate, just two people sizing each other up and arriving at a number that felt roughly fair, or at least not worth arguing over today. The shopkeeper held most of the cards, of course, since he knew exactly how badly you needed those nails, and exactly how many other people had already paid him in eggs that week. Then there was the credit, which is where things got genuinely tense. Most regular customers ran a tab, a running account scratched into the store's ledger, settled up only a few times a year when the harvest came in, or a little real money appeared. The shopkeeper was effectively your bank, your lender, and your judgmental accountant all at once, and he carried the entire town's debts in a single book he guarded like treasure. If you fell behind, he did not send a polite email. He looked at you, meaningfully, in front of your neighbours, and that was the real interest rate, the social kind. Your debt was not exactly private. The shopkeeper knew who paid promptly and who was always just one good season away from settling up, and that knowledge shaped how he treated you. what he let you buy, and how warmly he greeted you at the door. Your reputation and your balance were the same thing. Falling behind on your account did not just cost money, it cost standing, the ancient version of having your card declined in a crowded restaurant while everyone politely pretends not to notice. It was a system built entirely on trust, memory, and the fact that you simply could not skip town, because the town was the only town. You would see this man every week for the rest of your life, and he would remember everything. So you paid what you could, traded what you had, and kept your name in good standing the way you now nervously check a credit score. Shopping was tangled up with honour, debt, and a man with a very long memory. Which is exactly why, for a lucky few, the most thrilling thing in the world was when the store came to them instead. Let's go meet the peddler. It's time to meet the peddler, the man who brought the store to your door long before anyone thought to ship you a package. Picture a stranger trudging up the lane with a pack the size of a small cow strapped to his back, jangling with pins, ribbons, tin pots, and patent cures that definitely do not work. For families living miles from the nearest town, this sweaty miracle was the entire shopping experience. You didn't browse a catalogue. You waited, sometimes for months, for one exhausted human being to appear over the hill and unpack the outside world onto your kitchen table. Let's appreciate the sheer physical misery of the job. The peddler walked. Not for fun, not for steps on a wrist tracker, but for a living, often covering enormous distances on foot with a load that would buckle a mule. His pack held needles, thread, scissors, combs, buttons, spices, cloth, small tools, and a tantalizing assortment of trinkets, all carefully arranged so the heaviest things dug directly into his spine. Later, the more successful ones graduated to a horse and wagon, which was less a promotion and more a slight reduction in suffering. When he finally arrived at your farm, it was an event. Out here, days could pass without a single new face, so the peddler was not just a salesman. He was the news, the gossip, the entertainment, and the shopping mall, all in one travel-worn package. He told you what was happening 3 valleys over. He described the fashions in the city you would never see. And then, with a showman's flourish, he opened his pack on your table and turned your ordinary kitchen into a glittering little bazaar of things you suddenly realized you wanted. This was probably the first time shopping ever felt the slightest bit fun, and that was entirely on purpose. The peddler was a performer who happened to sell pins. He knew that a bored farm family, starved for novelty, would buy more if the buying felt like a treat, so he laid it on thick. He flattered the lady of the house, dazzled the children with a shiny bauble, and spun each ordinary ribbon into a small marvel. He was doing influencer marketing roughly 2 centuries before anyone owned a phone, and the product placement was your own kitchen. Of course, not everything in the pack was a bargain, and not every peddler was a saint. Some sold genuine, useful goods at fair prices. Others specialized in tonics that promised to cure baldness, rheumatism and sorrow, and delivered mostly alcohol, flavoring and confidence. By the time you realized the miracle elixir had not regrown a single hair, the man himself was already 2 counties away, charming someone else's kitchen table. There was no return policy when the store had legs and a head start. Still, for all his flaws, the peddler mattered. He stitched together a vast, lonely countryside, carrying not just goods but ideas, styles, and a faint whiff of the wider world to people who rarely left their own land. He was proof that you did not always have to go to the marketplace. Sometimes, gloriously, the marketplace could come to you, knock on your door, and unpack itself in your home. That single idea, the store that comes to the customer, would echo for centuries, all the way to the box on your porch tonight. But before any of that, there was one daily ritual of shopping that we have all thankfully been spared. Let's talk about haggling. Here is a horror that will make your modern soul ache. For most of human history, nothing had a price tag. Nothing. You walked up to a thing you wanted, asked what it cost, and then began a tense negotiation that could last longer than the average dental appointment. The merchant named a number designed to insult you. You named a number designed to insult him. And somewhere in the middle, after much sighing, you arrived at a price that left you both feeling vaguely robbed. Imagine doing this for socks. Imagine doing this for every single thing you have ever bought, every single time. Exhausting, isn't it? Let's walk through the ritual, because it was practically theatre. The merchant would glance at you, quietly judge your clothes, your accent, and how badly you seem to want the item, and then announce an opening price calibrated to your apparent desperation. This was not the real price. The real price was a secret, buried somewhere beneath layers of performance, and your job was to dig for it with feigned disinterest, dramatic gasps, and the threat of walking away that you both knew was at least half a bluff. It was a skill, and not everyone had it. A confident, sharp-tongued buyer who could keep a straight face and pretend not to care might walk away with a real bargain. A nervous, eager soul who lit up at the first sight of the goods was, financially speaking, a lamb among wolves. The merchant could read you like a book, show too much delight and the price climbed, show contempt and he sweetened the deal to keep you. Your face was your wallet, and a bad poker face cost you dearly. Now multiply this over your entire day. You did not just negotiate for one big purchase. You haggled over the bread, the cloth, the candles, the eggs, the repair of a wheel, the price of a chicken. Every interaction was a small contest, a low-grade financial duel fought over pennies, repeated dozens of times until you longed for the sweet mercy of a fixed number. Shopping was not relaxing. It was a series of arguments you had to win or lose all day long, like having every single purchase routed through a tiny, exhausting courtroom. It also made prices wildly, maddeningly unequal. Two people could buy the identical item on the same afternoon and pay completely different amounts, based purely on their skill, their nerve, and whether the merchant liked their face. There was no fairness, only negotiation. The wealthy stranger might overpay out of ignorance, while the local sharp talker paid half as much, and nobody considered this odd. It was simply how buying worked, an endless market where the sticker price did not exist because the sticker did not exist. And here is the truly tiring part. This was not reserved for some grand bazaar. This was the bread you bought to live. Every loaf, every nail, every yard of fabric came wrapped in a small mandatory argument. There was no quick errand because there was no quick anything. You braced yourself, sharpened your wits, and prepared to do battle over the cost of a thimble. It is genuinely difficult to fall in love with shopping when shopping fights back. So when relief finally arrived, it came not as a grand invention or a gleaming machine, but as something almost laughably small, a humble little paper rectangle that would quietly change the entire world. Let's go meet the price tag. And now a hero enters the story, and it is a small paper rectangle. The fixed price tag arrived in the 1800s and quietly changed everything. Suddenly an item cost what the sign said it cost, the same for you, your neighbour, and the stranger from out of town. No arguing, no insulting, no guessing whether the shopkeeper liked your face. It sounds boring, but this little square of honesty is what made big stores possible, because you cannot haggle with 200 customers at once and still have a voice by lunchtime. The price tag took the dread out of buying, and dread, it turns out, was the only thing keeping shopping from becoming fun. Let's appreciate how strange this idea was at the time. Telling a customer the price, the actual price, the same price for everyone, felt almost unnatural to merchants raised on the dance of negotiation. Some early shopkeepers who tried it were treated with suspicion, as if a fixed price must be a trick. But the merchants who embraced it discovered something magical. Honesty was efficient. A customer who already knew the cost did not need to be persuaded, charmed, or argued with. They could simply decide. There was a deeper, almost moral idea baked into this little tag too. Some of the earliest adopters were merchants who believed it was simply wrong to charge two people different amounts for the same goods. Why should a sharp talker pay less than a shy widow for the identical bag of sugar? The fixed price made everyone equal at the counter, and customers, it turned out, deeply appreciated being treated fairly. You could send your child to the store and trust they would not be fleeced. That trust was worth more than any haggled discount. But the truly revolutionary part was what fixed prices did for the size of the store. Think about it. If every sale requires a personal negotiation, your shop can only be as big as the number of arguments you personally have time for. One owner, one mouth, one slow morning of bartering. The price tag broke that limit clean in half. Now a single store could serve hundreds of customers at once, because the prices did the talking. You could hire clerks who did not need decades of haggling wisdom. They just needed to read the tag. This quietly unlocked the entire future of shopping. Without fixed prices, there could be no giant store full of strangers browsing freely, no clerk-light self-service, no sprawling departments under one roof. The little tag was the foundation stone of everything grand that came next. It was the unglamorous plumbing beneath the cathedral, the boring rule that made the spectacle possible. Nobody writes songs about the price tag, and yet without it, you would still be arguing over the cost of your shampoo this very evening. It also changed how shopping felt in your chest. Gone was the low hum of anxiety, the bracing for battle, the worry that you were being taken for a fool. In its place came something almost relaxing. You could wander, look, and consider, knowing the number on the tag was the number, full stop. For the first time you could browse without dread, and browsing without dread is the seed from which an entire national hobby would bloom. The merchants had accidentally made shopping pleasant, and once shopping was pleasant, the truly ambitious among them began to wonder, what if we made it magnificent? Let's step into the department store. Let's step into the grandest building you've ever entered that was not a church. The department store has arrived, and it would like you to forget you came in for buttons. Marble floors stretch out beneath glittering chandeliers. Glass cases sparkle with gloves, perfume, and things you did not know existed and now cannot live without. There are entire floors, plural, each one a little kingdom of temptation. No one is rushing you. No one is even watching you much. For the first time in history you are allowed to wander, to touch, to want, and to leave without buying a single thing. This is new. This is dangerous. Let's start with the sheer scale, because it was designed to overwhelm you in the most pleasant way possible. After the dim, cramped general store, walking into a department store was like stepping out of a closet and into a palace. Soaring ceilings, sweeping staircases, and acres of polished floor announced that this was no mere shop. This was an occasion. The building itself whispered that you, yes you, deserve to spend your afternoon among beautiful things, and possibly your money too. Then there was the radical new freedom to simply look. In the old world, walking into a store meant committing to a transaction, facing a shopkeeper, asking for goods, and feeling the pressure to buy. The department store threw that out. Here you could drift from counter to counter, examining silk and silver and shoes, picking things up and setting them down with no obligation whatsoever. The doors were open, the goods were out, and the message was clear. Come in, look around, no pressure. It was the original just browsing, thanks. And the goods, oh, the goods were everywhere and out in the open. Instead of hiding stock behind a counter, the department store piled its treasures into glass cases and open displays, lit and arranged to make your heart beat faster. You did not have to ask a guarded clerk to show you the gloves. The gloves were right there, splayed out like jewels, daring you to imagine your hands inside them, seeing a thing, touching a thing, picturing it as yours. This was a brand new and deeply effective way to make you want. The store offered comforts that had nothing to do with shopping and everything to do with keeping you inside. There were restrooms, lounges, restaurants, and tea rooms. So a respectable person, particularly a respectable woman, could spend the entire day there in comfort and safety. It became a destination, a place to meet a friend, eat lunch, and pass the hours pleasantly. The longer they kept you under that roof, surrounded by lovely things, the more likely you were to leave with a parcel or three. Comfort was the bait, and it worked beautifully. So the department store quietly rewired what shopping meant. It was no longer a quick, dreary errand for things you needed. It was an experience, an outing, a small luxury you treated yourself to whether or not your cupboards were bare. You came for one spool of thread and left having seen wonders, sipped tea, admired the chandeliers, and acquired a hat you had not known you wanted that morning. Shopping had become entertainment, and the building was the show. But the cleverest merchants soon realized they did not even need you to come inside to start the wanting. They could begin working on you right there on the cold sidewalk, through a pane of glass. Let's talk about window shopping. Tonight we honor a pastime so pure it costs nothing and accomplishes even less. Window shopping. As stores grew grand, their owners realized the sidewalk itself was an audience, so they turned their front windows into glowing little theatres of desire. Mannequins posed in the latest fashions. Goods were arranged like treasure, and you, dear listener, could stand on the cold pavement at night, nose nearly to the glass, planning an entire imaginary life you absolutely could not afford. It was free entertainment, gentle torture, and the first time shopping became something you did with your eyes instead of your wallet. Let's start with the invention of the big glass window itself, because it was a genuine marvel. For most of history, shop fronts were small, dim, and shuttered, with goods tucked safely out of sight. Then came large, clear panes of plate glass, and merchants suddenly had a stage facing the busiest street in town. Behind that glass they could build entire little worlds, lit up and dressed to dazzle, visible to every single person walking by, day or night, paying customer or not. The street had become a free gallery, and these merchants took their windows extremely seriously. They hired dedicated artists called window dressers or trimmers, whose whole job was to arrange the display so beautifully that passers-by would stop in their tracks. Mannequins were posed mid-laugh at imaginary parties. Fabrics cascaded like waterfalls. Each window told a tiny story, a glimpse of a glamorous life that could be yours, in theory, if you had the money, the occasion, and a place to wear an evening gown to fetch the milk. The genius of it was that you did not need a single coin to enjoy the show. Window shopping was the people's entertainment, a free spectacle available to anyone with feet and an evening to fill. Couples strolled past the displays as a date. Families admired them after church. The poor and the rich looked through the very same glass at the very same treasures, equally able to dream, even if not equally able to buy. It democratized desire, handing out wishes to everyone regardless of their wallet. But let's not pretend this was charity. Those gorgeous windows were a slow, patient hook. The merchant knew that the dream you built tonight, standing in the cold and gazing at that perfect coat, would follow you home and whisper to you for days. Wanting is the first step to buying, and the window planted the want for free, then waited. It was advertising disguised as art, a sales pitch that asked nothing of you tonight except that you remember it tomorrow on payday when the doors were open. So window shopping rewired the act of buying in a subtle and lasting way. It split shopping into two parts, the wanting and the having, and made the wanting a pleasure all on its own. You could shop, in a sense, without ever spending, browsing with your imagination instead of your purse. That habit lives in you still, every time you scroll past things at midnight with no intention of buying, just looking, just dreaming, just torturing yourself a little. The glowing rectangle in your hand is the descendant of that glowing window. But for the family living far out in the countryside, miles from any glass display, the wonders of the modern marketplace still felt impossibly distant, until a single, fat, magical book landed in the mailbox. Let's open the catalogue. Imagine a single book so thick it could stop a door, so full of wonders it could stop a child's heart. This is the mail-order catalogue, and out in the countryside it was nothing short of magic. Inside its pages lived everything a town store could never stock. Dresses, tools, toys, furniture, and yes, eventually entire houses delivered in pieces. Families read it by lamplight like a novel. Children claimed pages as their own. You no longer had to live near a city to buy like one. The whole glittering marketplace now fit inside your mailbox, and your imagination did the rest. Let's understand the problem it solved, because it was an enormous one. If you lived far out in the country, your shopping was held hostage by the local general store, which carried a limited range of goods at prices it could set however it liked, because where else were you going to go? The catalogue blew that wide open. Suddenly a farmer in the middle of nowhere had access to the same vast selection as a city dweller, often at lower prices, all printed neatly with no haggling required. The monopoly of the local store had met its match in the mailbox, and the selection inside was genuinely staggering. We're not talking about a thin little pamphlet. These catalogues swelled to hundreds upon hundreds of pages, listing thousands of items from boots and bonnets to ploughs, stoves, pianos, tombstones, and eventually entire build-it-yourself houses shipped to your nearest rail station in numbered pieces. If a thing existed and could be boxed, it was probably in there somewhere, described in loving detail. It was the everything store, roughly a century before anyone typed the phrase into a screen. The catalogue also became something no shop had ever been, a beloved object in the home. Families pored over it together by lamplight, treating it as reading material, entertainment, and a window onto a wider world. Children were sometimes given old pages to play with or memorized the toy section like scripture. People nicknamed it the Wish Book, and the name was perfect, because that is exactly what it was, a fat-bound volume of pure, affordable longing that you could hold in your lap and dream into for hours. It quietly taught rural America a thrilling new way to shop, one based entirely on trust and patience. You picked your item from a picture and a description, filled out your order, sent off your money, and then waited. sometimes for weeks for a box to arrive carrying the thing you'd only ever seen on paper. There was a small leap of faith in every order, a hope that the real coat would look like the drawn one. It was the great-grandparent of clicking buy now and trusting that a stranger far away would send you what they promised. So the wish book did something remarkable. It detached shopping from place entirely. You no longer had to be near a store, near a city, near anything to buy like the rest of the country. The marketplace had been printed, bound, and mailed directly to the most isolated farmhouse on the loneliest road, and the family inside could shop the whole nation from their kitchen table. It was freedom, in the form of a very heavy book. But a wish book is only a cruel tease if the things you order cannot actually reach you. The catalogue promised the world, and now the world has to find a way down your muddy country lane. Let's talk about delivery, but a wish book is only a tease if nothing can actually reach you. So let's talk about the quiet revolution of getting things delivered to the middle of nowhere. Before this, picking up your mail meant a long trip to a distant post office, which rather defeated the point of ordering by mail. Then the post began coming to you, right to a little box at the end of your lane. Suddenly, that catalogue dream had a delivery route. You could order a stove from your farmhouse and simply wait for the world to bring it. The doorstep delivery you celebrate today was born in the mud of a country road. Let's sit with the old misery for a moment, the way it worked before. If you lived out in the country, your mail did not come to you. It sat in a pigeonhole at a post office in the nearest town, waiting sometimes for days or weeks until you could spare the hours for the long trip in to collect it. That meant the magical catalogue and its magical promise of delivery still required you to hitch up the wagon, ride into town, and haul your purchases home yourself. The convenience had a very inconvenient last leg. Then came the simple, radical idea of bringing the mail directly to rural homes, free of charge, right to a box at the end of the drive. It sounds almost laughably basic now, but at the time it was transformative. A carrier would travel the country roads, rain or shine, stopping at each little box to drop off letters, newspapers, and increasingly the small parcels of a growing nation of mail-order shoppers. The farthest flung farmhouse was suddenly connected to the wider world by a daily visit. This quietly completed the catalogue's promise and supercharged it. Now the entire cycle of shopping could happen without you leaving your land at all. The wish book arrived in your box, you ordered from your kitchen, and the goods came back to that very same box or close to it. The trip to town, once an unavoidable part of buying anything, simply evaporated for a whole category of purchases. The store had not just come to your region, it had come to the end of your driveway and tipped its hat. As more and bigger packages began flowing along these routes, a dedicated parcel service grew up to handle them, designed to carry the heavier boxes that letters alone never could. This was the crucial link, the muscle behind the magic. Order a set of dishes, a winter coat, a butter churn, and the system would now physically carry it across the country and lay it at your door. The infrastructure of modern delivery, the great invisible machine that moves your stuff, was being quietly assembled, one rural mailbox at a time. So this humble little box on a post did something profound for how Americans shopped. It made distance almost irrelevant. The lonely farmhouse and the bustling city now had the same superpower, the ability to want a thing, order it, and have it arrive without a journey. The anticipation of watching for the carrier, of wondering if today was the day your parcel came, is the exact same flutter you feel now refreshing a tracking page. The doorstep miracle was born not in a warehouse, but on a muddy lane. But not all shopping moved to the mailbox. Back in town, A brand new kind of store was about to make buying feel less like a serious errand and more like simple, cheap fun. Let's wander into the 5 and dime. Let's lighten the mood and the price. Welcome to the 5 and dime, the store built on a gloriously simple idea that everything inside should cost about a nickel or a dime, and you should be allowed to touch all of it. No counter between you and the goods. No clerk guarding the merchandise like a dragon. Just open tables piled with candy, ribbons, toys, and small useless treasures laid out for grabbing. It was the first time shopping felt like play instead of a transaction. You came in with a few coins and left with a paper bag of joy, and possibly a tiny celluloid animal you would treasure for no reason at all. Let's start with the brilliant, almost suspicious simplicity of the pricing. Everything cost a nickel or a dime, more or less, and that single fact did something wonderful to your brain. You did not have to wonder if you could afford a thing, because of course you could. It was a nickel. The fear was gone. The math was gone. You could buy on a whim, on a giggle, on a passing fancy, because no single item could possibly hurt your wallet. It made spending feel weightless, which is precisely the point at which spending becomes a hobby. Then there was the radical openness of the place. Where the old general store hid its goods behind a counter and a watchful owner, the 5 and dime threw everything onto open tables right out in the middle of the floor. You could pick things up, turn them over, compare to, and put them back. The merchandise was no longer a guarded treasure you had to request. It was a playground spread out for your hands, and that freedom to touch and handle made every visit feel like an exploration rather than an errand. The range of small delights was the real magic. These stores carried a dizzying jumble of inexpensive goods, candy and toys and hair combs and kitchen gadgets and notions and little decorations, none of it essential, all of it tempting. You did not go to the 5 and dime because you desperately needed something. You went because it was fun, because for a handful of coins you could browse 100 tiny temptations and walk out feeling like you had won a small prize. It sold delight by the nickel. It was also, importantly, a place where everyone was welcome and no one felt out of place. The grand department store could feel intimidating, all marble and chandeliers and the quiet sense that you ought to be dressed up. The 5 and dime was the opposite, cheerful and democratic and unfussy. A child with a few pennies got the same open tables as anyone else. It made the pure pleasure of shopping available to absolutely everyone, regardless of how much was in their pocket, which was a genuinely new and lovely thing. And many of these little stores often had a lunch counter tucked along one wall, where you could perch on a stool and get a sandwich or a slice of pie for almost nothing. So a trip became a whole small outing, a bit of browsing, a cheap treat, a paper bag of odds and ends, and out the door grinning. The 5 and dime quietly proved a powerful point, that people would happily shop for the sheer joy of it, spending small amounts on things they did not need simply because it felt good. That insight, that buying could be fun rather than functional, was about to be weaponized, because a whole new profession was rising whose entire purpose was to make you want more. Let's go meet the ad man. Now meet the people whose entire job was to make you feel incomplete. Advertising grew up alongside the big stores, and it was very, very good at its work. Suddenly newspapers and magazines bloomed with pictures of happier, cleaner, better-smelling people who all seemed to own something you did not. The message was always the same and always gentle. Your life is fine, but it could be wonderful, if only you bought this. You were no longer just a person with needs. You were a customer with desires, and someone in a nice office had just discovered how to grow them like crops. Let's start with how the pitch itself quietly changed. Early advertising was mostly information. A plain little notice telling you that a shop had flour or boots or nails and where to find them. But the new breed of ad man realized that telling you a thing existed was leaving money on the table. The real trick was making you feel something. So the ads stopped describing products and started describing the better person you might become if you owned them. They sold the feeling, and the soap came along for the ride. And the favourite feeling to sell, it turned out, was a gentle, nagging inadequacy. The ads introduced worries you'd never thought to have. Were your teeth white enough? Did your home look as nice as your neighbour's? Was there a faint, shameful odour following you around that everyone but you could smell? For every freshly invented anxiety there was, conveniently, a product on the shelf to cure it. They were not selling mouthwash so much as selling the fear of being the person who needed mouthwash and did not know it. The ad men got remarkably scientific about all of this. They studied which words made you reach for your wallet, which pictures held your eye, which colours made you trust a label. They learned to attach their products to your deepest hopes: romance, success, being a good parent, fitting in. Buy this and be loved. Buy that and be admired. It was psychology aimed squarely at your soft spots, dressed up in cheerful pictures, and you absorbed it without ever quite noticing it was happening, the way you scroll past 100 such messages today. They also taught you to want things on a schedule, again and again. Why sell a person one tube of toothpaste when you could convince them to buy a fresh one every month forever? Advertising helped invent the very idea of the constant repeating purchase, the sense that consuming was not a rare event but a normal rhythm of life. You were meant to keep buying, keep replacing, keep upgrading, because there was always a newer, better, more improved version of the thing you already had sitting just out of reach. So the ad man performed a subtle, lasting magic on the American mind. He took shopping, which had begun as a grim response to genuine need, and turned it into a response to feeling, to mood, to the soft ache of wanting more. He made desire itself into a renewable resource, something that could be planted, watered, and harvested by anyone clever enough with words and pictures. You no longer shopped only when the cupboard was bare. You shopped when you felt small, or sad, or simply less than the smiling people in the advertisements. But to truly own your loyalty, the ad man needed something for you to be loyal to, a name you would reach for again and again without thinking. Let's talk about the magic of the brand. Let's talk about why you reach for one identical product over another identical product right beside it. The answer is a brand, and it was a stroke of marketing genius. Back when goods came loose from barrels and sacks, one bag of oats was much like another. Then companies started stamping their names on pretty boxes, promising that their flour, their soap, their crackers were special, trustworthy, and worth a little extra. You stopped buying things and started buying names. A cracker was no longer a cracker. It was a friend with a logo who would never let you down, at least not in the commercials. Let's go back to the barrel for a moment, because that is what the brand replaced. In the old store, your crackers, your oats, your sugar, all came scooped from open bins, anonymous and identical, with no name attached and no way to tell good from bad until you got home and bit in. You were trusting the shopkeeper, the barrel, and a great deal of luck. There was nothing to be loyal to because everything was the same nameless stuff. Quality was a gamble you took fresh every single time. Then companies had a clever idea. What if they sealed their goods in their own packaging, stamped with their own name, so you knew exactly whose crackers you were getting? Suddenly, the product had an identity. The sealed box also promised cleanliness and consistency. No fingers in the barrel, no mystery, the same crackers this week as last week. They were not just selling crackers anymore. They were selling a guarantee, a little printed promise that this box would be exactly as good as the last one. This quietly rewired your behavior at the shelf. Once you tried a brand and liked it, you remembered the name, looked for the familiar box, and reached for it again without re-evaluating every option. That is loyalty, and it was wildly valuable. A company that owned a spot in your memory and your habits, owned a piece of your wallet for years. You were no longer making a fresh decision each visit. You were following a relationship, returning to the trusted name like a regular greeting an old friend at the door. The brand also let companies charge a little more for the very same thing. 2 boxes of soap might be nearly identical inside, but the one with the famous name, the catchy jingle, and the reassuring reputation could command a higher price, and you would happily pay it. You were not paying for better soap. You were paying for confidence, for the comfort of the known, for the small peace of mind that comes from choosing the thing you've chosen before. It is a remarkable trick, charging extra for familiarity, and we fall for it cheerfully to this day. So the branded box did something profound to shopping. It turned anonymous goods into characters with personalities, products you could trust, prefer, and feel oddly fond of. It gave you favourites. It made the grocery shelf a gathering of familiar faces rather than a row of nameless stuff. And it built the invisible machinery of modern buying, where you reach past the cheaper, identical option to grab the name you know every time on autopilot. The ad men and the brands had perfected the art of making you want. Now all that wanting needed somewhere grand to go, a glittering district where every shop competed for your eye at once. Let's stroll downtown. Picture the heart of any American town in its busy heyday. The downtown shopping district is humming, and it is the closest thing your grandparents had to a mall with no roof. Streetcars clang past rows of shops, each window dressed to dazzle. People stroll in their good clothes because going downtown to shop was an event you got dressed up for, not a thing you did in sweatpants while eating cereal. There are department stores, dime stores, hat shops, and lunch counters all crowded together. For decades, this noisy, glamorous street was where America went to see, to be seen, and to spend. Let's begin with the sheer density of it, because that was the magic. Downtown packed dozens of stores shoulder to shoulder along a few busy blocks, so a single trip put the whole world of goods within easy walking distance. The grand department store anchored one corner, the cheerful Five and Dime sat down the way, and between them clustered shoe shops, jewelers, tailors, bakeries and counters selling every small thing a person could want. You did not drive from store to store. You simply walked, and the variety unspooled around you. And getting there was its own little adventure, usually aboard the streetcar. Before everyone owned an automobile, the electric streetcar lines all converged on the city centre, funneling shoppers from the neighbourhood straight into the heart of the action. This is partly why downtown grew so concentrated in the first place. It was the one spot everyone could easily reach. You rode in, you shopped, you rode home with your parcels on your lap, watching the town roll by, a small public ritual repeated by thousands of people every single day. The crucial thing to understand is that going downtown was an occasion, not an errand. You dressed for it. People put on their good coats and proper hats to go shopping, because the district was a stage and everyone was both audience and performer. You went to buy, yes, but also to stroll, to admire the windows, to nod at neighbours, to feel the buzz of the crowd. Shopping had fused with socialising and showing off into one glamorous outing, the kind of day you looked forward to all week. Downtown also offered everything you needed to stay all day. There were grand restaurants and humble lunch counters, theatres and tea rooms, benches and grand lobbies, all woven right into the shopping district. You could browse all morning, eat a proper lunch out, catch a show, and shop some more before heading home, exhausted and delighted, arms full. The city centre was not just a place to buy things. It was a destination for the whole day, a complete experience of being out in the world among lights and crowds and lovely goods. So for a long and golden stretch, downtown was the undisputed king of American shopping, the dazzling public heart where commerce, glamour and community all met under the open sky. It had everything: the grand stores, the easy streetcars, the crowds, the energy, the sense of occasion. It seemed unstoppable, permanent, the natural centre of everything. But every kingdom rests on something, and downtown's throne sat squarely on those streetcar tracks and that walkable crowd. Change how people moved, and you would change everything. And a machine was already rumbling onto the scene that would do exactly that. But first, every long day downtown needed a place to sit and catch your breath. Let's pull up a stool at the soda fountain. Every good hobby needs a place to rest your feet, and shopping found its perfect pit stop at the soda fountain. Tucked inside drugstores and department stores, these gleaming marble counters served up fizzy drinks, ice cream, and gossip in equal measure. After an exhausting afternoon of wanting things, you could perch on a stool, order something cold and sweet, and watch the world go by. It transformed shopping from an errand into an outing, a whole little day built around looking, buying, and treating yourself to a Sunday you had absolutely earned. The trip itself had become the fun. Let's set the scene at the counter, because it was a genuinely beautiful thing. Picture a long, polished marble top, a row of swivelling stools, and a gleaming wall of nickel taps, syrup pumps, and frosted glasses. Behind it stood the soda jerk, an apron-clad showman who pulled levers, mixed fizzy concoctions, and built towering sundaes with a flourish, all while keeping up a steady stream of friendly patter. It was theatre as much as refreshment, a little performance staged right in the middle of the store, and the menu was pure indulgence, which was exactly the point. Cold fizzy sodas, frothy ice cream floats, banana splits, milkshakes thick enough to bend a straw, all sweet, all cheap, all wonderfully unnecessary. Nobody came to the soda fountain because they needed nourishment. They came for a treat, a small bright reward at the end of a long day of browsing. It was the original "You deserve this," decades before that phrase appeared in a single advertisement. You had walked the whole district, so naturally you had earned a sundae. The genius of placing these counters inside stores was that it kept you there longer and sent you back out happy. A tired, footsore shopper might be tempted to call it a day and go home, but offer them a cool, sweet rest stop right there in the building, and they would sit, recover, refuel, and then, refreshed and cheerful, wander back into the aisles for another lap. The soda fountain was a clever little battery charging station for shoppers, disguised as a delicious indulgence, keeping the whole pleasant cycle of looking and buying going just a bit longer. It also turned shopping into a social event, a place to meet rather than just to buy. Friends arranged to gather at the fountain. Young people lingered there for hours over a single soda, talking and flirting and being seen. It became a community hub, a casual living room out in the world, where the line between shopping and simply socializing blurred completely. You might go downtown ostensibly to buy something, and end up spending most of your time and joy right there on a stool, and nobody minded one bit. So the humble soda fountain quietly cemented a powerful new idea, that a shopping trip should be a whole pleasant experience, not a quick chore to rush through and escape. It built rest, reward, and friendship right into the act of buying, wrapping commerce in comfort and sweetness until the outing itself became something you looked forward to. Shopping was now a day out, a treat, a pleasure with a cherry on top. But all of this gentle, walkable, streetcar-fed glamour was about to be upended by a loud, smoking, freedom-granting machine parked at the curb. Let's hand you the keys to an automobile. Now hand yourself a set of car keys, because the automobile is about to rearrange American life and your shopping habits along with it. Suddenly you're no longer trapped near the streetcar line. You can drive anywhere, which sounds liberating until everyone tries to drive to the same crowded downtown at the same time and discovers there is nowhere to put the car. Merchants notice this misery. They begin dreaming of stores with something downtown could never offer, a vast, glorious, free ocean of parking. The car gave you freedom, and that freedom was about to drag shopping right out of the city and into the open fields. Let's start with the intoxicating new freedom, because it really did change everything. For generations, where you could shop was decided by where the streetcar went and how far your feet could carry the parcels. The automobile shattered those limits overnight. Now you could go anywhere, anytime, and carry home as much as fit in the back seat. You are no longer tied to the city centre or any single route. The whole region opened up, and the radius of your shopping life expanded from a few blocks to many miles. But here is the cruel twist that freedom delivered. Everyone got the same idea at once. As more and more families bought cars and pointed them toward the same beloved downtown, the narrow old streets built for walkers and streetcars choked solid with traffic. And once you finally crawled into the city centre, a fresh nightmare awaited. There was nowhere to park. The dense, walkable downtown that had been such a strength was a disaster for the automobile, with no room for hundreds of metal boxes to sit while their owners shopped. This parking misery quietly poisoned the joy of going downtown. The trip that had once felt glamorous now began with a slow, fuming crawl through traffic and ended with circling the same blocks again and again, hunting for a spot, watching the meters, dreading the long walk back to the car with heavy bags. The friction piled up. What was the point of the automobile's grand freedom if using it to go shopping meant an hour of stress before you even reached a store? The car and the old city centre simply did not fit together. Clever merchants watched all this with great interest and began to dream a new dream. What if a store did not sit crammed into a tight downtown block at all? What if it sat out on the cheaper land at the edge of town, easy to drive to, surrounded by a huge, flat, free expanse of parking? Pull right up, leave the car a few steps from the door, load your purchases straight into the trunk and drive home. No traffic, no meters, no misery. To a driver, that vision was pure paradise, and it spelled doom for the crowded city centre. So the automobile, that gift of glorious freedom, quietly began to hollow out the very downtown it had once delivered crowds to. The thing that made the city centre great, its dense, walkable, all-in-one-place layout, was the exact thing the car could not abide. Shopping was about to pack up and follow the automobile out to the open edges of town, chasing easy roads and endless parking. The kingdom of downtown was cracking, and a new kind of store was rising in the fields beyond the city, built from the ground up around the car. Let's go push a cart through the first of them. Let's enter the supermarket. Let's go grocery shopping, except forget the polite little grocer who fetched everything for you. The supermarket has arrived, and it is enormous, bright, and slightly overwhelming on purpose. Instead of asking a clerk for each item, you now push through wide aisles and gather your own food from towering shelves. Meat over here, bread over there, a wall of canned goods that goes on forever. It is faster, cheaper, and far more tempting, because now you can see absolutely everything, including the 11 things you did not come for. Welcome to the store that quietly taught you to shop with your eyes and your stomach. Let's start with what it replaced, the old counter service grocer. In that world, you handed your list to a clerk who scurried about the shop, fetching each item for you one at a time, weighing, wrapping, and tallying while you waited. It was personal, sure, but it was achingly slow, and it required a small army of clerks to serve even a modest crowd. The supermarket looked at that whole arrangement and made a radical decision. Get rid of the fetching, let the customers fetch for themselves. This single change, self-service across the entire store, was the heart of the supermarket's power. By letting you roam the aisles and gather your own groceries, the store could serve far more people with far fewer staff, which slashed costs and slashed prices. Suddenly food was cheaper, and the shopping was faster, because you were no longer waiting in line for a clerk to retrieve your every potato. You'd become the unpaid worker in your own shopping trip, and somehow it felt like freedom rather than labour. Then there was the scale, the sheer overwhelming bigness of the place. Where the old grocer was a cramped little shop, the supermarket gathered meat, produce, dairy, bread, canned goods, and 1,000 other items all under one enormous roof. One stop, one building, everything you could possibly need to feed a family for a week. No more trotting from the butcher to the baker to the greengrocer. The supermarket consolidated the entire food world into a single, efficient, slightly dizzying expedition. But the truly clever part was that seeing everything made you want more of it. In the old store, you asked for what was on your list, and that was that. In the supermarket, every product sat out on open shelves, brightly packaged and patiently waiting to catch your eye as you wheeled past. You came in for bread and milk and found yourself face to face with cookies, chips, a tempting display of something on sale, and a dozen colourful boxes whispering your name. The open shelves did the selling for the store silently all day long, so the supermarket did far more than make groceries cheaper and faster. It quietly retrained how you shopped, turning you into a self-guided hunter, wandering aisles laid out by people who understood exactly how your eyes and appetite worked. It put temptation everywhere and a clerk nowhere, and it discovered that you would happily fill your basket far beyond your list if simply allowed to roam among the goods. You left with more than you planned every single time, and you blamed only yourself. But all this gathering needed something to carry it, and what arrived to help you was far more cunning than it appeared. Let's talk about the shopping cart. Behold the humble shopping cart, an invention so clever and so devious it deserves its own segment. When supermarkets first appeared, shoppers could only buy as much as 2 arms could carry, which kept their spending politely limited. Then a clever store owner had a wicked thought. What if you gave people a rolling basket on wheels so they could carry far, far more? At first folks refused, embarrassed to push a little cart like a child with a toy. But once the habit took hold, baskets grew into carts, and carts grew into wheeled wagons, and your grocery bill grew right along with them. Let's appreciate the simple, brutal logic of the problem first. A shopper carrying a basket or balancing armloads of goods has a built-in limit, namely, the moment their arms ache and fill up, the shopping stops. That aching limit was quietly capping how much every customer could buy. A store owner watching shoppers head for the register the instant their hands were full realized that the human arm was the single biggest obstacle standing between him and a bigger sale. Solve the carrying, and you solve the limit. So the cart was born, a basket set on wheels that let you roll your goods around instead of lugging them. The genius was that it removed the natural stopping point. With a cart, your arms never got tired and your basket never quite filled, so you simply kept shopping, kept adding, kept wheeling down one more aisle. The store had gently lifted the ceiling on how much any one person could buy in a single trip, and shoppers obligingly bought more to fill the lovely empty space rolling along beside them. But here is the wonderfully human part. At first, people flatly refused to use the thing. Many shoppers, especially men, found it faintly embarrassing to push a little wheeled basket around like a toddler with a toy wagon. It bruised their pride. Clever store owners had to actually hire people to walk the aisles, pushing carts and pretending to shop just to make the contraption look normal and dignified. It took a bit of stage theatre to convince the public that pushing a cart was a perfectly grown-up thing to do. Once the embarrassment wore off, of course, the cart only grew because bigger carts meant bigger sales. The modest little basket on wheels swelled into the roomy metal wagons you know today, with a child seat, a lower rack, and enough capacity to haul a week of provisions for a small village. Every increase in cart size was a quiet invitation to buy a little more, and shoppers cheerfully accepted, filling the ever larger space without quite noticing they had done so. The cart kept growing, and the receipt kept pace. So the shopping cart, that squeaky, wobbly, pull-to-the-left companion, turns out to be one of the most quietly effective sales tools ever devised. It removed the last natural brake on your spending, the simple ache of carrying, and replaced it with smooth, effortless, ever-expanding capacity. You buy more because you can, because it is easy, because there is room. It looks like a convenience offered to you, and it is, but it is also a brilliant nudge aimed squarely at your wallet. And the cart was only one piece of a much larger, far more cunning system, an entire store designed to lead you gently astray. Let's wander into the world of self-service and the impulse buy. Let's talk about a quiet trap laid at your feet, or rather, at your eye level. Self-service meant you no longer asked for what you wanted. You simply roamed the aisles and took it, which sounds wonderful until you realize the store has been arranged by people who studied exactly how you walk, look, and reach. The candy sits by the register for a reason. The expensive brands sit at eye level for a reason. You came in for 3 things and left with 13, and you genuinely believe each of those 10 extras was your own idea. That is not an accident. That is design. Let's start with the basic shift that made all of this possible. The moment stores let you serve yourself, wandering freely instead of asking a clerk, they handed you freedom, but they also handed themselves a powerful new weapon. Now, they did not have to persuade you through a salesperson. They could persuade you through the layout itself, through where things sat, how they were lit, and what caught your eye as you drifted past. The store became a silent salesman, working on you every single step. Consider the simple matter of eye level, which store planners treat as sacred ground. The products a store most wants you to buy, the pricier, more profitable ones, are placed right where your gaze naturally falls, easy to see and easy to grab. The cheaper options get banished to the high shelves or down near your ankles, where you have to hunt and stoop to find them. You think you are freely choosing, but your eyes were guided to a particular shelf before you even reached for anything. The choice was quietly arranged in advance. Then there is the matter of where things live and how far apart. The staples everyone needs, the milk, the eggs, the bread, are often tucked at the very back, so that fetching them marches you past aisle after aisle of tempting things you did not plan to buy. The path itself is a sales pitch. By the time you reach the one essential you came for, you have run a gauntlet of bright packaging and clever displays, and your cart has mysteriously acquired several passengers that were never on your list. And then comes the masterstroke, the checkout lane. After all that wandering, you arrive at the register and find yourself trapped in a slow line, idle, a little bored, surrounded at arm's reach by candy, gum, magazines, and small cheap treats. This is the impulse zone, and it is no accident either. The store knows that a waiting, restless shopper is a vulnerable one, prone to tossing one more little thing onto the belt. You did not come for a chocolate bar. You leave with one anyway, captured in the final seconds. So self-service, that gift of freedom and convenience, turns out to be one of the most sophisticated traps in the whole history of shopping. You believe you're the captain of your own cart, choosing freely, and in a sense you are, but the seas have been carefully charted to steer you exactly where the store wishes. Every extra item feels like your own bright idea, which is precisely why it works so beautifully. You leave overspent and entirely convinced it was all you're doing. And this cunning new way of selling was about to leap out of the single store and reshape entire neighbourhoods as shopping chased the growing crowds out to the edge of town. Let's follow them to the suburbs and the strip mall. Pack up the family, because America is moving to the suburbs and shopping is following close behind. As neighbourhoods sprawled out past the city, stores chased the people and the parking, lining up in long, low rows along the new highways. This is the strip mall, a humble little parade of shops sharing one giant lot. It was not beautiful, it was not grand. But it was easy. You could park right out front, dash in, and leave without ever fighting downtown traffic again. Convenience had become the whole point, and the glamorous city centre was about to feel very lonely. Let's start with the great migration that set it all in motion. After a long stretch of crowded city living, families began pouring outward into freshly built suburbs, neighbourhoods of tidy houses and green lawns spreading across what had recently been farmland. They had space, they had cars, and they had no desire to drive all the way back into the congested old downtown just to buy a frying pan. Where the people went, the stores were always going to follow, and the people had gone to the edge. So merchants set up shop out there, along the new roads, and the form they chose was the strip mall, plain and practical to its core. Picture a single long building divided into a row of separate shops, all facing a large shared parking lot. A grocery store, a drug store, a hardware shop, a diner, maybe a laundromat, lined up side by side like a row of teeth. There was nothing fancy about it. No marble, no chandeliers, just a no-nonsense parade of useful stores with a sea of parking out front. And that parking out front was the entire point, the strip mall's killer feature. After the parking nightmare that had soured downtown, here was blissful relief. You drove right up, parked a few steps from the very door you wanted, ran your errand, and were back in the car within minutes. No traffic crawl, no circling for a spot, no long hike with heavy bags. The strip mall sold convenience above all else, and to a busy suburban family with a car and a to-do list, that convenience was worth more than any glamour. Notice what this quietly did to the nature of shopping. Downtown had been a destination, a whole dressed-up day out among crowds and lights. The strip mall was the opposite. A quick, efficient pit stop you swung by in everyday clothes between other chores. You did not stroll the strip mall for pleasure or put on your good coat to visit it. You darted in, grabbed what you needed, and left. Shopping was shedding its sense of occasion and becoming something faster, plainer, and woven casually into the ordinary errands of the week. So the suburbs and their strip malls marked a real turning point. Shopping had officially followed the automobile out of the dense, glamorous city centre and into the spread-out, practical landscape of the edge. Easy parking beat grand architecture. Quick convenience beat the day-long outing. The strip mall was no one's idea of beautiful, but it was relentlessly useful, and useful was winning. Yet some ambitious dreamers looked at this plain little row of shops in the empty parking lot and thought, surely we can do better than this. Surely we can recapture the magic of downtown, the wonder, the occasion. But with all the easy parking of the suburbs and a roof over the whole thing, let's step into their grand creation. Let's enter the enclosed mall. Now step inside the dream that would define shopping for generations, the great enclosed mall. Imagine an entire downtown rebuilt indoors, sealed off from rain, snow, and the inconvenient passage of time. The temperature is always perfect. The fountains burble. Plants you cannot name sit beside benches no one really uses. There are no windows and no clocks, because the people who built this place would very much like you to forget how long you've been here. It was designed as a town square with a roof, a place to spend the whole day, and spend you did. Shopping finally had its palace. Let's start with the grand ambition behind it, because the enclosed mall was trying to have everything. It took the wonder, variety, and sense of occasion of the old downtown and married it to the easy parking and suburban convenience of the strip mall, then sealed the whole arrangement under one enormous roof. Dozens, even hundreds of stores gathered along bright indoor avenues, ringed by a vast ocean of parking outside. It was downtown reborn but tamed, controlled, and protected from every inconvenience the outside world could offer. And control was the entire genius of the place. Out in the real downtown, shopping was at the mercy of the weather, rained out one day, frozen the next, baking the day after. Inside the mall, the climate was always flawless, a gentle, eternal springtime regardless of the blizzard or heat wave beyond the walls. You could shop in comfort every day of the year, in shirt sleeves in January, never once braving the elements. The mall had quietly removed weather from the equation, and with it, every weather-related excuse to stay home. Then there were the famous tricks designed to bend your sense of time. Look around a classic mall, and you will notice something eerie. There are no windows to the outside and no clocks on the walls. This was no oversight. With no daylight creeping in and no time staring back at you, you lost track of the hours, drifting from store to store in a pleasant, timeless daze. The mall wanted you to forget that the afternoon was vanishing, because the longer you stayed, the more you would see, want, and buy. It was a casino that happened to sell sweaters. The mall also leaned hard into the soothing, dreamlike atmosphere, the burbling fountains, the potted greenery, the soft echo of distant music, the wide tiled walkways and benches. None of this sold a single product directly. All of it existed to make you comfortable, calm, and content to linger, to feel that you were not running a harsh errand but enjoying a pleasant stroll through a welcoming indoor world. A relaxed shopper is a generous shopper, and the mall worked tirelessly to keep you relaxed and in no hurry whatsoever to leave. So the enclosed mall became the crowning palace of American shopping, a self-contained kingdom where you could happily lose an entire day. It gathered everything under one perfect, weatherless, clockless roof and invited you to stay as long as you possibly could, which was rather the point. Shopping was no longer a chore, an errand, or even just an outing. It had become a place you went to spend your free time, a destination unto itself. And there was one group of people for whom the mall would become far more than a place to shop. For them it would become a whole world, a hangout, almost a home. Let's hand the kingdom over to the teenagers. Let's hand the mall over to its true rulers, the teenagers. For decades, the mall was not just where you bought things, it was where an entire generation grew up. Kids were dropped off on weekends with a few crumpled dollars and absolutely no plan. They roamed in packs, flirted by the fountain, lingered in the music store, and bought a single soft pretzel they made last for hours. It was a hangout disguised as a shopping centre, a place to be free and almost adult. Shopping was no longer something you did. It was somewhere you went to simply exist. Let's understand why the mall was so perfect for them, because it solved a very specific teenage problem. A young person was too old to want to stay home with their parents, but too young to drive themselves anywhere truly exciting. The mall threaded that needle beautifully. It was a place a parent felt safe dropping you off, indoors, supervised in spirit, full of other kids, yet it felt thrillingly independent. For a few hours you were out in the world on your own, free to wander, with no adult hovering at your shoulder. And the beauty of it was that the mall asked almost nothing of you in return. You did not need much money to belong there. A teenager could spend an entire afternoon drifting through the stores, trying on clothes with no intention of buying, listening to records, and nursing a single cheap snack, and that was a perfectly complete day. The mall did not chase you out for failing to spend. It let you linger, and lingering, for a young person with empty pockets and full hours, was the whole point. The mall also became the great social arena, the place to see and be seen. You went not just for the stores but for the people, to meet your friends, to bump into the kid from your class you were too shy to talk to anywhere else, to walk slow laps and observe the entire social universe of your town in one climate-controlled loop. Romances bloomed by the fountain. Friendships were forged in the food court. It was a stage for the whole drama of growing up, and the shops were merely the scenery. Certain spots became sacred territory. The music store, where you flipped through records and discovered who you wanted to be. The arcade, glowing and beeping, swallowing quarters and afternoons. The food court, that grand communal table where every group in town eventually crossed paths. These were not just stores. They were landmarks in a teenager's map of the world, the places where memories were made, where you first felt the heady mix of freedom, belonging, and possibility that defines being young. The mall was the backdrop to 1,000 small, important moments. So for a long golden stretch, the mall was far more than a shopping centre to a whole generation. It was a kingdom they ruled on weekends, a world of their own, a place to practice being adults without any of the responsibility. Shopping had quietly transformed into something almost incidental, the excuse rather than the purpose. You went to the mall to be somewhere, to belong, to live a little, and maybe, almost as an afterthought, you bought a thing or two along the way. But all this lingering and spending required something to spend, and a small piece of plastic was about to enter every wallet and quietly rewrite the rules of buying entirely. Let's talk about the credit card. Here comes the single most dangerous thing ever to fit inside a wallet. The credit card replaced the shopkeeper's dusty ledger with a sleek little piece of plastic, and it whispered a thrilling new idea. You did not need the money right now. You could have the thing today and pay for it later, in some hazy future where you would surely be richer and wiser. Spending stopped feeling like losing money, because no money seemed to leave your hands at all. It was magic. it was freedom, and it was, of course, a trap with a very pleasant interest rate that you would come to understand far too late. Let's go back to that old ledger for a moment, because the credit card is its descendant. Remember the shopkeeper's book of quiet debt, where your name and your balance were scratched and settled up a few times a year? The credit card took that same ancient idea, buy now and pay later, and made it portable, universal, and available to nearly everyone. But where the old ledger tied you to one shopkeeper who knew your face, the card let you carry your credit anywhere and spend it everywhere. The debt had been set free to roam. The truly powerful trick was what the card did to the feeling of spending. Handing over cash hurts a little. You watch the bills leave your hand, you feel the wallet grow thinner, and that small sting naturally reins you in. The card removed the sting entirely. You simply presented a piece of plastic, signed your name, and walked out with your treasure. No visible money lost at all. The pain of paying was postponed to a vague future moment, and a purchase with no immediate pain is a purchase you make far more freely. This quietly dissolved the oldest limit on shopping, the simple fact of how much money you actually had. For most of history, your spending was capped by the coins in your pocket. The credit card lifted that cap. Now you could buy things you could not yet afford, betting on a future where the money would somehow appear. It let you live a little beyond your means, just a touch, just this once, and then again and again, until the gap between what you earned and what you spent became a quiet, growing weight. And here is where the pleasant little trap revealed its teeth. The convenience was real, but so was the interest. If you didn't pay the full balance promptly, the unpaid amount began quietly growing, a fee for the privilege of spending tomorrow's money today. Many people discovered, slowly and painfully, that the easy magic of buy now had a long tail of pay later, and then pay more, and then keep paying. The card gave with one hand and patiently collected with the other, and it never, ever forgot what you owed. So the credit card completed a journey that had been building for centuries, the steady separation of the joy of buying from the pain of paying. It made spending feel weightless, instant, and almost free, which is precisely what made it so dangerous. Shopping was now possible at any moment, for anything, regardless of what sat in your bank account, and the bill would simply find you later. It was the ultimate enabler of shopping as a pleasure rather than a careful necessity. But before plastic made spending quite so instant, there was a slower, gentler way to buy what you could not yet afford, one built on patience instead of debt. Let's talk about layaway and installments. Before plastic made spending instant, there was a gentler, slower way to buy what you could not yet afford. With layaway, the store held your treasure in the back while you paid for it bit by bit, week by week, until it was finally, truly yours. With installment plans, you took the sofa home today and mailed in payments for what felt like the rest of your natural life. It taught Americans a powerful new lesson, that you did not have to choose between wanting something and waiting for it. You could do both at once, suspended in a delicious state of almost owning it. Let's start with layaway, because it was the more patient and innocent of the two. Say you spotted a coat you adored but couldn't afford all at once. Instead of going without, you asked the store to set it aside to lay it away in the back while you paid for it gradually over the coming weeks. The coat was reserved with your name on it, safely off the rack, waiting. Only when you had paid the full price did you finally carry it home. You waited, but you waited with the certainty that it would be yours. The clever thing about layaway was that it asked you to want something for a long stretch of time, and that wanting did its own quiet work. Every week, as you handed over another small payment, your attachment to that coat deepened. By the time it was finally yours, you'd been dreaming of it for a month or more, and it felt less like a purchase and more like a reward you had earned through faithful patience. The store had turned the act of saving up into a slow, sustained relationship with a single item. The installment plan took the opposite approach, and it was bolder. Here you took the thing home immediately, the sofa, the washing machine, the fine new furniture, and then paid it off in regular chunks over the following months or years. You got the pleasure first and spread the pain out behind it. This was how ordinary families suddenly furnished whole homes with big expensive goods they could never have bought outright. A little down, a little each month, and the comforts of a richer life were yours today. Both systems, in their different ways, were teaching the country something profound and a little bit dangerous. They were dissolving the old strict rule that you could only have what you could pay for in full right now. Layaway said you could claim a thing before you finished paying. Installments said you could enjoy a thing long before you finished paying. Either way, the hard wall between wanting and having was being softened into something you could ease through gradually, on a schedule, in slow and manageable pieces. So these patient little plans were quietly laying the emotional groundwork for everything that came after. They got Americans comfortable with the idea of stretching a purchase across time, of living in that pleasant in-between state of almost owning, of paying steadily for joys already in hand. It was a gentler, slower cousin of the credit card, a training course in buying beyond the moment. The instinct it built, that you need not wait until you could truly afford a thing, would only grow bolder from here, and soon the marketplace would find a way to reach you not on the street or in a store at all, but right in your own living room, glowing in the corner. Let's switch on the television. Now settle onto the sofa, because the store is about to climb inside your television. Advertising had already learned to follow you into print, and now it strolled right into your living room with sound, motion, and a jingle you would be humming against your will for the next 30 years. Commercials showed you glittering products in glowing homes, and later whole channels appeared that sold things around the clock to anyone awake enough to dial a phone. You could now shop without a store, without a street, without even standing up. The couch had quietly become a checkout line. Let's appreciate the leap that television represented for the ad man. A printed advertisement could show you a picture and some clever words, but it sat there silent and still on the page. Television gave the pitch a voice, a tune, and movement. Now a product could be demonstrated in action, accompanied by music, narrated by a warm and trustworthy voice, all beamed directly into the cozy heart of your home night after night. The advertisement was no longer something you glanced at. It was something you watched, and it watched you watching. And the jingle? Oh, the jingle was a weapon of terrifying power. A catchy little tune attached to a product would lodge itself in your brain and refuse to leave, humming away for years, decades, a lifetime. You might forget your own appointments, but never forget the song for a soap you had not bought since childhood. This was advertising that did not just inform you, it inhabited you, taking up permanent residence in your memory. The product became part of the furniture of your mind, summoned instantly the moment you saw it on a shelf. Television also painted aspirational little worlds you were quietly invited to envy. The commercials did not just show a product. They showed a bright, happy family in a spotless kitchen, a glamorous person in a beautiful home, a life that gleamed just a little more than your own. The unspoken promise was always the same. Buy this and step a little closer to that shining world. You were not really being sold a dish soap. You were being sold a vision of the contented life that came with it. Then came the boldest move of all, channels and programs devoted entirely to selling, around the clock. Here the line between watching and buying dissolved completely. A friendly host would display a piece of jewellery or a gadget, talk it up with warmth and urgency, and invite you to pick up the phone and order it that very instant. No store, no street, no leaving your seat. You could shop at any hour of the day or night in your pyjamas, half asleep, simply by reaching for the telephone. The store never closed and never made you stand up. So television completed yet another quiet revolution in how you bought things. It brought the entire apparatus of wanting and buying directly into your living room and parked it in the corner, glowing and chattering, all evening long. You no longer had to go out to be sold to or even to buy. The pitch came to your couch, the jingle moved into your head, and the purchase was just a phone call away. Shopping had crept all the way into your home and made itself comfortable. But out in the physical world, stores were about to swing in the opposite direction entirely, growing not smaller and more intimate, but vast, cavernous, and gloriously, absurdly enormous. Let's go big. Let's enter the warehouse. Let's go big, gloriously, absurdly big. The big box store and the warehouse club arrived with a simple, intoxicating promise that everything would be cheaper if you simply bought a frankly unreasonable amount of it. Why purchase one jar of mustard when you could own a tub of it large enough to bathe a toddler? The buildings are the size of airplane hangars. The carts are the size of canoes. You came in for paper towels and left with a year's supply, a folding kayak, and a rotisserie chicken you will eat in the parking lot. Saving money had never felt so much like spending it. Let's start with the sheer physical scale, because these places were built to dwarf you. Forget the cosy shop or even the roomy supermarket. The big box store was a vast windowless cavern, a hangar of a building with soaring ceilings, concrete floors, and goods stacked toward the heavens on industrial shelving. Walking in, you felt small, almost lost, surrounded by an overwhelming abundance of stuff piled high in every direction. The store was not trying to feel intimate or charming. It was trying to feel infinite. The core trick was the bargain of buying in bulk, and it was genuinely clever. The promise was that the more of a thing you bought at once, the cheaper each unit became. A modest jar of something cost a certain amount, but a colossal vat of the same thing cost less per ounce, and that math was deeply satisfying to the human brain. You were not just shopping. You were being thrifty, you told yourself, getting more for your money, even as you wheeled away enough mayonnaise to last until the next decade. Then there was the warehouse club, which added a wonderful twist, the membership. To shop at these places, you first paid a fee just to walk through the doors, and strangely, that fee made you want to shop harder, not less. Having paid for the privilege of entry, you felt obliged to make it worthwhile, to load up, to get your money's worth out of the membership itself. The club had brilliantly turned the cost of admission into a reason to spend even more once you were inside. You belonged now, and belonging meant buying. The stores also leaned into the thrill of the unexpected. Amid the towering pallets of household basics, you would suddenly stumble across a folding kayak, a hot tub, a diamond ring, or a giant television, plopped down with no warning between the toilet paper and the canned beans. This treasure hunt randomness kept you wandering, kept you curious, kept you tossing things into your canoe-sized cart that you had absolutely not come for. You never knew what wonder might appear around the next towering aisle, so you kept looking and you kept buying. So the big box store and the warehouse club performed a delicious sleight of hand on the American shopper. They dressed up enormous spending as careful saving. They convinced you that buying far more than you needed was the smart, frugal, responsible thing to do, all because the price per unit looked so very reasonable. You left with a cart piled impossibly high, a receipt longer than your arm, and a warm glow of having saved money somehow by spending a great deal of it. And once a year, this whole appetite for deals and abundance would build to a single frenzied, dawn-breaking peak. Let's brace ourselves for the chaos of Black Friday. Let's talk about the one day a year shopping fully removes its mask and reveals itself as a contact sport. Black Friday turned the morning after a peaceful family feast into a dawn stampede for discounted televisions. People camped in parking lots overnight. Doors flew open, and ordinary gentle citizens transformed into a thundering herd willing to wrestle a stranger over a slow cooker. It made no sense, and that was the point. The deals, the crowds, the chaos, all of it became a ritual, a national holiday devoted entirely to the thrill of buying. Shopping had become a spectacle you trained for. Let's start with the strange beauty of the timing. The day arrives immediately after a holiday devoted to gratitude, family, and quiet contentment. A day of sitting peacefully around a table counting one's blessings. And then, before the leftovers have even cooled, the very same people rise in the dark and hurl themselves into a frenzy of acquisition. The whiplash is remarkable. One evening you are giving thanks for what you have, and the next morning you are willing to trample a stranger for a marked-down appliance. The deals themselves were the bait, and they were engineered to short-circuit your reason. Stores offered a small number of items at prices so low they seemed almost like errors, doorbuster bargains designed to lure crowds out into the cold before sunrise. The catch, of course, was scarcity. There were only a few of these treasures, so getting one meant being first, being fast, being fierce. The store had quietly turned shopping into a competition, a race with winners and losers, and nothing sharpens human desire quite like the fear of missing out. Then came the rituals, which grew genuinely epic. People pitched tents in parking lots and camped out overnight, braving the cold for a place near the front of the line. Families coordinated like military units, dividing up the store, assigning each member a target, synchronizing the assault. And when the doors finally burst open, the crowd surged in as one heaving mass, a stampede of bargain hunters charging toward the marked-down goods. The scenes were equal parts comedy and chaos, ordinary people transformed into a thundering, single-minded herd. What made it all so strange was that the buying had floated almost entirely free of need. Nobody camped overnight in the cold because they desperately required a new television. They did it for the deal, for the win, for the sheer electric thrill of the hunt. The object barely mattered. What mattered was the chase, the victory, the story you would tell afterward about the slow cooker you fought for and won. Shopping had become pure spectacle and pure adrenaline, a competitive sport played for the joy of competing. So Black Friday revealed something the whole long story had been building toward in secret. Shopping was no longer about acquiring what you needed, or even about pleasant browsing. At its most extreme, it had become a thrill, a ritual, a national event you prepared for and threw yourself into for the sheer rush of it. The deals were almost beside the point. The real product being sold was excitement, and a whole country lined up in the dark to buy it. But this hunger for the deal, for the win, for the glow of a bargain, did not need to wait for one wild morning a year. An entire kind of store was built to deliver that very feeling all year round. Let's go chasing bargains at the outlet mall. Now let's chase a very specific and very modern high, the deep, glowing satisfaction of getting a deal. The outlet mall was built entirely on this feeling. offering name brands at slashed prices in stores conveniently located just far enough away to make the trip feel like an adventure. It did not matter if you needed anything. What mattered was the hunt, the tags announcing how much you supposedly saved, the triumphant math you did in your head. You could spend $200 and somehow feel like you'd made money. The bargain itself had become the product, and the savings were the souvenir. Let's start with the clever distance, because the location was no accident. Outlet malls tended to sit out beyond the edge of town, a real drive from anywhere, and oddly, that worked in their favour. The journey turned a simple shopping trip into an outing, an expedition, a little day-long adventure you planned and looked forward to. You were not just popping out for an errand. You were making a pilgrimage to the land of bargains, and the effort of getting there made the eventual deals feel all the more earned and precious. Then there was the magic of the brand name at a discount, which pushed two powerful buttons at once. You already trusted and desired the famous names, thanks to a century of advertising. Now here they were, those very same coveted brands, marked down, on sale, available for less than you expected to pay. It was the best of both worlds, the prestige of the name and the thrill of the bargain, fused into one irresistible package. You got to feel both fashionable and frugal in a single purchase, and that combination was hard to resist. The genius lay in how the savings were presented to you. Every tag proudly displayed two numbers, the original higher price and the lower price you were paying, with the gap between them spelled out as your reward. You did the happy arithmetic in your head, calculating how much you had saved, and that number felt like winnings, like money you had somehow gained rather than spent. The store had brilliantly reframed the act of spending as an act of saving. The more you bought, the more you saved, or so the seductive math insisted, and this completely changed the reason you were there in the first place. You did not come to the outlet mall because you needed a specific thing. You came for the hunt, the treasure-seeking thrill of digging through the racks for that perfect marked-down find. The joy was in the discovery, the bargain, the score. The actual object was almost secondary to the triumphant feeling of having gotten it cheap. You shopped not to fill a need, but to chase that sweet, glowing rush of the deal again and again. So the outlet mall perfected an idea that would come to define modern shopping, that the bargain itself is the product. The thing you carried home mattered less than the satisfaction of how cleverly you had acquired it. The savings were the real souvenir, the story you told yourself and others, the proof of your skill as a shopper. Buying had become a game scored in dollars saved, and the outlet mall handed out victories all year long. But all of this, the malls, the outlets, the warehouses, still required you to get in the car and go somewhere. That too was about to change, as a humming machine on a desk quietly prepared to bring the entire marketplace to you. Let's watch the internet wake up. We now arrive at the strange dawn of buying things through a humming beige computer. At first it seemed faintly absurd, typing your card number into a screen and trusting that a real object would somehow appear at your home days later. Early online stores were clunky and slow, loading one tiny picture at a time while you waited and wondered if you had just been robbed. But the old wish book had simply changed clothes. The endless catalogue was back, now glowing, searchable, and open at every hour of the night. You could not see it yet, but the mall was about to lose its crown to a screen. Let's appreciate how genuinely strange this felt at first. For all of history, buying something meant some physical connection to it. A store, a peddler, a catalogue you held in your hands, and an order you mailed off. Now you were being asked to type your most sensitive numbers into a glowing screen, trusting an invisible company you had never seen to send a real object to your door at some unspecified future date. It required a real leap of faith, and many people, quite reasonably, hesitated at the edge of that leap. And the early experience did little to soothe those fears. The websites were slow and awkward, images crawling onto the screen one painful sliver at a time while you waited and squinted. The whole process felt fragile and uncertain, like you might lose your order, your money, or both at any moment. There was no smooth magic here, just a clunky, patient, faintly nerve-wracking experiment in trusting a machine. You finished an order and then sat back, half convinced you had simply handed your money into the void. But beneath the clumsy surface, something profound was stirring, because this was really the old wish book reborn. Cast your mind back to the mail-order catalogue, that fat book of dreams you ordered from by faith and waited weeks to receive. The internet was that exact same idea, the marketplace brought to your home, with the waiting and the trust built right in. It was the catalogue all over again, only now it glowed, it could be searched in an instant, and it was never, ever closed. That last part was quietly revolutionary. Every store in history had hours, a moment when it opened and a moment when it locked its doors and sent you home. The online store had no such limits. It sat there waiting at 3 a.m, on holidays, in the dead of winter, endlessly open, endlessly stocked, ready whenever the urge struck you. You could shop at any hour, in any mood, from anywhere, with no drive, no parking, no crowds, no closing time. The marketplace had become a thing that never slept. So this awkward, humming, beige beginning was far more important than it looked. The clunky early websites were the first faint stirrings of a shift that would eventually topple the mighty mall itself. The whole grand journey, from general store to downtown to suburb to palace, was about to fold back in on itself and return to the home where the wish book had once landed in the mailbox. Shopping was coming back to your house, only this time it would be faster, smarter, and almost frighteningly easy. And it was about to get easier still, until buying a thing took no more effort than a single, idle tap. Let's witness the doorstep miracle. Let's marvel at the moment shopping became nearly effortless, almost frictionless, dangerously easy. Online stores learn to remember you, to save your address, your card, your every past desire, until buying something required no more effort than a single tap. A thought would cross your mind at midnight, and a few hours later a box would appear on your porch as if summoned by a wizard. There were no clerks, no carts, no parking, no pants required. The chore your ancestors dreaded had been reduced to a reflex, a tiny gesture you could perform half asleep, and the packages just kept on coming. Let's start with the quiet genius of being remembered. The early online stores made you type everything fresh each time, your address, your card, your details, a small friction that gave you a moment to reconsider. Then the stores learned to remember it all, to store your information and greet you by name. Now there was nothing left to type, nothing to fetch, nothing to slow you down. The store knew exactly who you were and exactly how to charge you, and all that remained between a whim and a purchase was a single, frictionless tap. That removal of friction was everything, because friction was the last thing holding your spending back. Every little obstacle in the old way of buying, the drive, the parking, the line, the typing, gave you a moment to pause and ask whether you really wanted the thing. One-click buying erased all of those moments at once. The gap between the fleeting impulse and the completed purchase shrank to nearly nothing. A thought became a transaction before your better judgment could so much as clear its throat. Wanting and buying had fused into a single instant. Then there was the speed of the arrival, which felt like genuine sorcery. In the catalogue days, you ordered and then waited weeks, the delay a natural part of the bargain. Now you tapped at midnight and the box appeared on your porch with astonishing quickness, sometimes the very next day, as though conjured. The waiting that had always tempered mail-order shopping simply melted away. The desire and the delivery drew so close together that buying began to feel less like a transaction and more like instant gratification, a wish granted almost as fast as you could form it. And the whole thing required nothing of you, not even leaving your bed. No store, no street, no car, no crowds, no clerk, no proper clothing. You could shop lying down in the dark, half asleep with a single thumb. The entire grand apparatus of buying, which had once demanded a whole dressed-up day downtown, had been compressed into a tiny gesture you could perform without sitting up. Shopping had become so easy that it barely registered as an activity at all, more a passing reflex than a decision. So this was the final destination of the long journey, the chore your ancestors dreaded reduced to almost nothing, where they once hitched a wagon and braved the mud for a sack of flour. You now tap a glowing rectangle, and a box appears at your door as if by magic. The friction, the effort, the waiting, the very weight of buying had all been engineered away, leaving only the pure, instant, effortless act of acquiring. And when acquiring becomes that easy, that frictionless, that available at every idle moment, a strange thing happens to why we do it at all. Buying stops being about the things entirely. Let's arrive at the final, curious truth of this whole story. Let's talk about retail therapy. And so we arrive at the strangest destination of all, the place where buying things stopped being about the things at all. Somewhere along this long journey, shopping quietly became a mood, a comfort, a cure. You have a bad day, so you treat yourself. You feel anxious, so you browse. The act of choosing, wanting, and acquiring now soothes something deep and a little restless inside us, which is exactly what every shopkeeper, adman, and mall builder in this story was secretly hoping for. What began as a dreaded chore, a muddy trip for a sack of flour, has become a hobby, a habit, and on the hard days, a kind of medicine. Let's trace how we arrived here, because every step of this story was quietly leading to it. The price tag took away the dread. The department store added the wonder. The adman planted the wanting. The brand offered the comfort of the familiar. The mall built the palace, and the screen put it in your pocket. Piece by piece, over more than a century, buying was stripped of its pain and stuffed full of pleasure, until the act itself began to feel good, entirely apart from whatever you happen to be buying. Consider what actually soothes you in a moment of shopping, because it is rarely the object. It is the choosing, the small thrill of deciding among options, of exercising a little control. It is the wanting, that pleasant flicker of desire and anticipation. It is the acquiring, the brief glow of having gained something new. None of this requires the thing you bought to be useful, or needed, or even particularly good. The comfort lives in the ritual of buying itself, which is why the box, once opened, so often leaves the feeling behind. And this is precisely the destination the whole long parade of merchants was steering toward, whether they knew it or not. A customer who shops only when they need something is a limited customer, but a customer who shops to feel better, to lift a mood, to soothe a worry, to celebrate or to mourn or simply to pass an idle, restless evening, that customer never runs out of reasons. By tying buying to feeling, the marketplace found a well of demand that never empties, because feelings, unlike pantries, are never truly full. There is something both marvellous and a little melancholy in where we've ended up. Marvellous, because shopping is now so easy, so pleasant, so abundant that it can genuinely comfort us, and there is no small magic in that. Melancholy, because a chore that once simply met our needs has become a feeling we reach for to fill something the goods can never quite satisfy. The cart fills, the box arrives, the glow fades, and the restless something stirs again, ready to be soothed once more. The cure, it turns out, wears off. So here we stand at the end of the long road, all the way from the dim general store to the midnight tap that summons a box to your door. Shopping has travelled from a thing done to us out of grim necessity to a thing we do for ourselves out of pure feeling, a hobby, a comfort, a habit, a balm. The journey is complete, and it ends not with a product but with an emotion, the quiet, soothing, endlessly renewable act of wanting and getting. And as you lie there now, perhaps with a package or two of your own waiting by the door, it is worth pausing to think about just how far this strange and very human story has come. So here we are, at the quiet end of a very long road. Tonight you travelled all the way from a dim general store that smelled of pickles and regret, where buying a sack of flour was a chore you put off until the pantry wept, to a glowing rectangle that summons a box to your door while you lie half asleep. You haggled over thimbles. You waited months for a peddler to crest the hill. You pressed your nose to a glowing window, dreamed over a fat wish book by lamplight, and pushed a squeaky cart down aisles arranged by people who knew exactly how you walk. You wandered the marble cathedrals of the department stores, lingered by the mall fountain, and chased the sweet glow of a bargain through endless racks. And somewhere along the way, shopping stopped being a thing done to us and became a thing we do for ourselves, a hobby, a comfort, a quiet little cure. It is worth a small, sleepy moment of wonder, really. Everything you could ever want now sits a single tap away, open at every hour, asking almost nothing of you. No mud, no haggling, no closing time. The dreaded errand of your ancestors has been polished century by century into something so easy it barely registers as effort at all. So tonight, as you settle into your soft bed, with the whole bright marketplace tucked safely away behind a darkened screen, maybe spare a gentle thought for how strange and lovely that is, for the price tag that ended the arguing, for the mailbox that brought the world down a muddy lane, for all the small inventions that turned a chore into a pleasure. The cart is empty now. The wanting can wait until morning. Rest easy and sleep well.